I don't see Cassandra.
She's not here. She's not making it tonight. She's away or something.
Good evening and welcome to the Upper Darby Planning Commission meeting for this evening, April 10th, 2023. We have one absence tonight. Cassandra is out of town and everyone else is present. You have the meeting minutes from last meeting, which was not in March, but in February. If you haven't had a chance to look at those, does anybody have any corrections, additions, deletions?
I make a motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We have no communications or bills to worry about this evening. We also have no presentations for SALDO or zoning reviews this evening. And so before we move into old business, I'd like to recognize that we have two guests present this evening. We have Councilwoman Michelle Billups and Mayor Keffer with us. And Mayor Keffer, would you like to address the commission?
Good evening, everyone. I'm glad I could make it today. There are a couple things. So I think next week we're going to make an announcement that the township is holding an art contest. It's public art. We are going to, we've picked out 5 signal boxes. Signal boxes are those big silver boxes at intersections. They hold, Jeff, you already know. A lot of people don't know what they are. Anyway, the contest is going to be open for about a month for residents that are 14 years and older. We will be in communication with the school district and the other schools, the private schools here. And I think it would be a good idea if the planning commission were to judge the entries. So please think about that. And because I like to be kept out of it. But they're at major intersections like Drexel and State. Remember, there's one at Beaumont and Garrett. We originally picked one on 69th Street, but it's not really a competing contest, but the Shade Tree Commission won a grant from TD Bank, and they're doing a whole streetscaping project. And each of the 3 signal boxes on 69th Street are going to be painted, but they're going to handle that, awarding and that kind of thing. So altogether, hopefully by the fall, there'll be like 8 signal boxes at major intersections that are decorated by residents. So I'm pretty excited about that because we've been looking into it for over a year, but we're finally ready to launch it. What else do I have here? So there's a new appointee to the zoning hearing board. His name is Kyle McIntyre. And this is something that you're going to have to sort out because there's some updates to the zoning code, I think, that we would like to work on regarding a lot of things, but parking restrictions. So I don't know how that goes. Is this something that gets, do you work on the different zoning?
Yeah.
Amendments to the zoning ordinance here?
Yeah, this is definitely a body that would work to come up with ordinances and amendments and then make a recommendation, bring it to council, or if or if someone else had those recommendations, we would review it here and then make a recommendation and that would go to council. So we can do both. Like right now we're working on the smoke shop. We're coming up with different ordinances and ideas and different ways to amend the ordinance.
Okay.
And so there'll be, that's something that we're working on. And so it could be something like that.
So, I mean, I'd like for us to look at like transit oriented development, overlay districts, things like that. I think you worked on the building up the street, the Buick building. I don't know where that is in the zoning. That's a different topic though. But so is this something, so the planning commission, you think council and the zoning hearing board, do they work on that at all? Or are they out of the loop?
For something like a TOD district?
About, I don't know, amendments to the zoning code.
Yeah, I mean, amendments to the zoning code could definitely, I'm sure if one person from council wanted to be kind of the person pushing behind it, but they could definitely come to this group or work with this group and, we'll come up with along with the planning department, come up with the draft language and ordinance. And we can give that to council.
Or a regular resident, maybe?
Sure.
That's a little bit more informed.
So, yeah, and when you say things like the TOD overlay district too, you could almost do a steering committee with members of the planning commission on it, but also other members to kind of come together and maybe make a plan about what that would look like. And that could go from anything for being like little pilot projects with temporary, hay and trees and stuff to, a full-blown public input on those different TOD districts.
Okay. All right, so it sounds like it's going to be a process. And until then, you just kind of cross your fingers and hope the zoning hearing board grants variances and stuff. Is that right? Okay, that's fine. A topic that came up at the Shade Tree Commission meeting last Thursday was there's something in the zoning code about if you put a driveway in, it has to be an impervious surface. And somebody that lives in the Garriford neighborhood came and he was talking about that because he wants to have a pervious driveway. So that's something else to look into, I guess. I haven't really studied it. I guess this is more zoning maybe than the planning commission. But one thing I'd like the planning commission to do is to look over the comprehensive plan, right? It was ratified in 2018. And so we're like at the halfway mark kind of, right? If it's a 10-year plan. So it would be great to get an update on things that have happened that kind of fit into that, to the comprehensive plan, and to see where we are. There's timelines in there, and there's kind of goals towards the end. So I have a copy of my comprehensive plan. Does everybody have a hard copy? Do you need a hard copy? Would you prefer a hard copy?
That would be great, yeah.
We are short of hard copies, and yes, the commission members would love to have hard copy. There is the copy on the website, but you know how it has the nice pull-out maps and stuff.
Right.
Do you know if there are any more, do you have your hands
I think
on
we have to
them?
print them up again.
You have mine, right?
And I have mine here, and I'll just leave it.
Okay.
One quick example I can think of there is that in that comprehensive plan, it makes a recommendation that we have a recreation commission. So we're working towards it. We have a recreation committee, and they've been very active over the last two and a half years. But we're also trying to build, on the administrative side, a real recreation department. So we kind of need the department before we have the commission. But that's just like an example of something that I remember that was recommended in that. Because I guess, you don't have saldos and land developments every month. And I think it would be really useful before we go out and look for another firm to do the next comprehensive plan, like just get a really good handle on the plan that exists. It's pretty good. And just see where we are and what things we could do maybe in the next couple years to make the plan look like, we're trying to work it. Since we're supposed to have one, and it's real helpful when we go out and get grants and things like that. It'd be good to have like a record of our successes and attempts and things like that, so.
Yeah, I think it's given the halfway point, having a kind of just a look, how are we doing against it, especially as we go for grants is important.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I'm reading my notes, and sometimes I remember why I wrote this specific thing. So with the Buick building, there was questions before the zoning hearing board about parking. And I think they were asking for relief I think it's outdated, the parking restrictions that we have.
Can I just ask, the Buick, they want to convert it to apartments, is that the gist of the plan? Okay, all right.
Yep.
Okay.
And kind of related to that is the school district put out a rough plan. It's on their website, a PowerPoint of potential sites for new elementary school. And Cardington Field was mentioned. The school district owns that, and the township leases it for $1 a year, and we take care of it. That was mentioned as a place, and also Marshall Road Field. So Marshall Road Field is pretty complicated because the township owns part of it and the school district owns part of it. So they haven't made any firm plans, but both of those spots are, I think they're top 2. So there's also these parking restrictions as well. Like maybe 3 per classroom or something. it just seems prohibitive. It's something that they would have to go, if they were going to put the plan forward today, they'd have to go before the zoning hearing board and ask for relief. So that's just a couple things that are upcoming. And I think that's it for me. Do you have any questions for me? Or do you have any updates on like what's going on with whatever Burger King or the Starbucks at Lansdowne and State?
They
What-
have,
Yeah, what is going on with the Starbucks?
they haven't been back.
Have not come
They
back.
haven't been back since they were here.
Yeah, Starbucks has not been back yet.
That's a while.
Yes,
Was
it's
that
been a
8
while.
months ago or?
It's been quite a while.
Okay.
Right. And they haven't been back.
So they're,
Say 2 years?
I don't think it's quite been 2 years, but I believe they are revamping their site plan and coming back. And they're probably coming back to square one too, zoning and planning commission.
Okay. And is there anything going on with Burger King?
Yeah, we're almost there.
They're ready to start.
They need to record, but once they record, they should be ready to start construction, so it shouldn't be probably more than a month.
I would say less, than your plans will be coming to you soon for signature.
Okay. Now, is it a myth that the Wawa is not going to be built at Drexel Line? I keep hearing that.
That to me is a myth, because every time I talk to Drexel Line, they mention the Wawa's going to be there.
Okay. And if it were not going to be the Wawa and something else would be built, they would have, some plans would have to be submitted.
Unless it was a different, similar building, different user they could use,
Like if Royal Farms came in?
Exactly.
Okay. All right, I think that's all I have for right now, but I asked, Michelle Billups is here, she's Secretary of Council, and so we have Jim Mullen, Jeff, and now, of course, your last name's escaping
Roken.
me,
Roken.
Roken, Debbie Nifong, and Steve Bertil. Did I say your last name right? Okay, and Cassandra's missing, but so, yep. I think that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. A lot of the things that the mayor has just talked about, I think we've all discussed here and there, especially as we've talked about the time frame for getting back into the comprehensive plan. We talked about driveways a bit earlier because we did have a resident come in with some driveway concerns of another sort. So we've kind of had driveways floating around the edge. So this is yet another reason to go back and look at the driveway ordinance. And the idea of the signal boxes and having us as I love that idea. So you said that's going to start in another month as far as the contest?
The contest is gonna, I'll mention at the next council meeting next week. So the launch will be in about a week.
Oh, that's exciting. Okay. That's a great idea, and I'm glad that we can be a part of it. Okay, the next thing on our agenda is to go back and look at the work that's been done since we last talked about the smoke shop ordinance. When we talked about it before, we realized that the definition of smoke shop in our ordinance was a little bit lacking, and that it made it difficult in some ways for our code people to be able to enforce regulations. So we talked about wanting to tighten up that definition. We talked about tightening up, actually not tightening, but expanding the distances between smoke shops and between smoke shops and other types of institutions. I think now we say 500 feet. We had expressed the desire to maybe take that to 1,000. And the other thing we talked about was maybe getting a little more restrictive on which zoned areas a smoke shop could be in. So in the meantime, Josh and Leah have done a little bit of research to see what others are doing in this regard. And Josh, you want to tell us a little bit about what you found?
Yeah, so essentially, if you flip to your packet, page 1 is just our current definition of a smoke shop, which isn't a bad definition, but it, definitely leaves, there could be other included definitions. One of the things that we found in,
You have another one of these by chance?
might be short.
Here, go ahead. I already went through it.
You don't have one?
The 9?
Yeah, but it's.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's the right page.
Do you have it? something from the Boston Code, includes ancillary sale, which is kind of getting into that discussion of these, not smoke shops that say smoke shop, but these grocery store convenience stores that are actually smoke shops, just in disguise. And that, that kind of gives it, at least a name. And they do that by, I think including 2% of the gross floor area or 200 square feet. And then that just kind of gives us something to go off of, in terms of, how we might look to calculate it in the future. Because right now we have it by 20% and of retail sale or retail, I think, merchandise, which isn't something that's easily accountable. So I think what we've seen here, and they show us again in, I'm going to say this wrong, but Matamoros Borough, is that they're really using more square footage when they're looking at these retail stores and looking at, what makes a smoke shop calculation. And then you could either do, like this says 75 square feet or 2% of its retail space. And I think that's going to be a lot easier than trying to count merchandise, every packet of M&Ms.
Yeah.
This also helps with like a Wawa,
Right.
because it's the fact that they sell tobacco products is really ancillary to the coffee and the sandwiches and everything else that's going on there.
Absolutely, and we'd want to make those divisions. And then the last page just kind of compares what we have, and again, how far each store can be from each other. And then this is the 1,000 feet, which just kind of shows us that, right, it's been done somewhere else. And that if we wanted to adopt that 1,000 feet, we wouldn't be the first ones.
Okay. So there is precedent for these types of.
A little.
All right. No, it's, like I
It's-
said before, I
it's-
don't mind being out in the forefront of this.
We're definitely in the forefront. There was nothing necessarily about it being any use restricted. Most places just have it where you can have retail.
Okay.
But again, I don't think there's anything wrong with being on the forefront.
Okay. And did we discuss with the solicitor about, we kicked around restricting it in the neighborhood commercial districts, not permitting it.
Yeah, in some
Okay.
of them.
And that's
yeah.
still on the table?
Well, I mean, you can recommend whatever this body agrees on.
Okay.
Just have to put it to a vote. So I guess, I just wanted to share this with you and kind of wanted to get your opinion on what do you think, that square footage, one, how are we going to calculate that square footage? Would it be some type of, would it be the floor area? Would it be the shelving units? Would it just be if I looked at the shelves as if they were 2D and took square footage? So just some things to think about. And then also, what should that threshold number be? Is 2% make sense? Or is there a different percentage that makes sense? So these are kind of the things that I wanted to at least put in your guys' heads, start thinking about, and then we can come back and make some decisions and
Okay.
as we go into our
What do you
draft.
think is, what is the least unambiguous way of calculating, if you're out there enforcing this stuff? Like, you know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, no, I know what you're
It's-
saying. I'm just trying to, definitely, I really like the square footage,
Yeah.
or the 2%, because if you get the interior square footage, you can find that out very quickly.
Okay, all right.
2% seems a little low to me, but I like that it's using a percentage because, difference, like a large grocery store should have a different threshold than a little grocery store, right?
Right.
For the, I guess generally speaking, in my head, as I was reading it, I was trying to sort of determine like, okay, what's sort of like the average size of these kind of places? Because we're usually not dealing with like supermarkets, right? And so I'm trying to figure out like, what's the average ground, because it's usually something that's like ground floor commercial, maybe like in a residential apartment above it.
Yeah, they're not big. They're not big, but that's a good point. We can,
You know what I mean? Like,
So
I can't picture it in my
I
head.
guess the storefront that you're thinking of
Right.
is, the first floor is 900 square feet? Does that sound about right?
well, I think
That's what I
that,
can't,
You know what I mean? Yeah.
I think that maybe is the next step of the research, is kind of figuring out, well, what we have now, what does it actually look like? And what would these, you know,
It's too bad, square feet, I mean, that's not, what's the alternative? Oh, or 200 square feet.
Yeah, so two of them have chosen 2%, and then one has 100 square, anything greater than 100 square feet would be.
Right, that would be a little over 10% of like a 900 square foot.
Right.
So that's a big difference, you know what I mean, 2%. And so maybe in their market, where is this from, Boston, you said?
Yeah.
Boston
Oh,
is,
Boston.
yeah, 2% or 200 square feet.
Right, so maybe like that's.
Matamoros-Borough.
Have a percentage or a hard number. They're like routinely, in practicality, it's usually close, and then you do whatever, and they have something like whatever's lower, because for further enforcement. But if the variance between the percentage and like just the square footage is like extremely wide, then that doesn't really serve the purpose to have, percentage or, you know what, you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's why I'm asking the question, like, oh, okay, does 2% make sense? But I think the only way to answer if that makes sense is if whatever number that would kind of bear out to be is about around the size of what we're seeing in terms of these displays and stuff like that. If it's not even close, then it actually has no teeth as a form of enforcement, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
It doesn't help you. The threshold of everything will get under that threshold anyway because of the square footage or whatever the case may be. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Or am I talking in circles? But you get what I'm saying, right?
Yeah. And then the other question is, do we want to do it in a three-dimensional way, right? Where it's
So that gets.
length times width times height, or is everything, everything just two-dimensional, like you're looking from the top down at a site plan?
Just do frontage, just to make it.
But it, frontage?
Yeah, like,
Oh.
if it's a 6-foot wide section and it's smoked stuff, then it's 6 feet.
6 by whatever, 2 feet high,
Exactly. Now, are you factoring in storage as well, or just vision? Some of them.
just what they're showing,
they have
just
small
display.
thing, And then they have this enormous storage place in the back of inventory.
I'd say we want to move away from the merchandise calculations and just do display.
Okay.
That would be my recommendation.
I think the only way you really do it, to have the people who are trying to implement it, be able to do it and do it effectively, it's
2D, okay.
has to go by frontage. Now, and if it's a 6-foot case and if it's got 5% Cokes or something in it, you still count a lot. If they're gonna say beverages, soft drinks in with it. If it's mostly smoked stuff, then that whole number gets counted. But I have a friend up in Connecticut who said their problem is this one shop, I mean, they had they had shrunk the store, and it was a smoke shop, and the warehouse behind it was full of, like, their whole warehouse was all smoke shop stuff. And that's how they're determining it's a smoke shop. They didn't have any Cokes in the back, no chips, no Hershey bars, all smoke stuff. They're gonna find a way to get it. I mean, and I also have to say, I think we have to be careful. I mean, obviously, people in our town are shopping there, because that's people,
Mhm.
I mean, it's like girly bars. I mean, people go to them, that's why they have them. So I'm not
Right.
saying we should put them here, I'm just saying that we should be addressing the realistic perspective of, is it something that people
Right.
still want to do?
Josh, do you have a feeling enforcement-wise over the three-dimensional? I mean, I can see, obviously, if we stay two-dimensional, somebody can have something, 4 feet by 2 feet and only with one shelf, whereas someone could have 4 feet by 2 feet and the shelf goes, 10 shelves as they go up all the way to their ceiling. They're selling a lot more product then in the same space.
Right, the setup of most of these places is everything's pushed against the back walls. So from top to probably about waist is all the merchandise. Then there's an aisleway, and then there's a clear case in front, and that kind of forms an L mimicking the walls. That's generally how most of them are laid out.
So does three-dimensional seem to make more sense then?
But that creates a drafting issue because that's not the gross floor area, that's something different. So we would have to characterize it differently in terms of the thresholds. Because that's like a defined term, right? Gross floor area means like one thing in general. So it's like, what are we talking about when we, I conceptually understand what you're saying when you say three-dimensional measurements, but what is that in practical terms? I guess you probably, I don't know if you have.
Well, yeah,
That seems like harder to enforce almost in my eyes, but maybe that's because I'm a layperson when it comes to these.
It's very hard to enforce. I grew up in a grocery store, so that whole.
Yeah.
Spatial and all that kind of stuff.
That's what I'm saying, that gets,
Right, because people could shove in more.
And they couldn't get it, and, you know, like the old fashioned stores used to have shelves up high, and you grab it, that went away, and I saw that coming, you know, whatever. I just think that the 3D might, but I think we have to be realistic, who's gonna be enforcing it, what tool can we best
I think
use?
you have to stick with ground floor area, because otherwise you would have to be an architect to enforce.
Yes, right.
Like, you know what I mean, like, how else would you? It would almost end up being something like I don't even know how to characterize it, but sort of like the total area, the total percentage of shelving area, like, I'm not even sure how that would.
And most of it going to be mostly smoke stuff. It's not gonna be a hard number to come up with, because most of them, that I peeked in one near me, it is 97% smoke stuff. It's not even, these numbers are gonna be easy to.
Right, well, that's now because we don't have it, but and maybe I'm wrong, but what I'm anticipating what would happen is, whatever the new language is, supposed to try to find a way, like any second sport, they'll try to find, okay, how can I circumvent this regulation? And, they'll find the ways, and the way, I think, doing it through D or whatever we're calling it, I think that makes it, that opens up the floodgates for the creative.
Oh, I don't want 3D, but I think that, so I started to look at it, so the percentage is, if it's 20% or more smoke oriented, it's considered a smoke shop, is that it?
2%. Well, it's,
If it uses.
Oh, I'm sorry.
no, this is what we're proposing, right?
Proposing, we're proposing, what was the proposal now?
Well, I don't think
It's not our proposal, but what they do is,
You're actually, no, it is, you're talking about the 20% of total merchandise. You're talking about merchandise percentage?
Are you calling merchandise smoke oriented? Or general merchandise?
The current zoning is 20% or more of its, total merchandise. Of the, tobacco product accessories, et cetera, et cetera. And the proposed language, not proposed, but I guess, the research that showed, in terms of like, comparative language for what we're trying to propose, moves away from the percentage of the merchandise being sold to the dimensions of the area where it's being sold.
Right, so-
And that's 2% or 200 square feet,
Okay.
whichever is less.
I'm still not grasping. I'm so sorry, because I didn't have a chance to read anything before. So, in order for them to really be an effectively profit smoke shop, they have to be like 95% or more smoke stuff. So as long as we're making that number significant where they only have half a store, that's where it works out. So I think it should be 51%
Of the gross floor area?
of the gross floor area should be smoke, if 51% or more is gross, of their gross floor area is smoke shop, then they're a smoke shop.
Wait, we'd like to make that even more restrictive than that, the 51%, right? It's-
Right, because this is
Well,
for the exception.
So, wait, so Josh, just to clarify, so on page 1 is the current zoning ordinance.
right,
Okay.
that's just as is.
And then what's on page 2? Is this what we want to, these are what we're kicking around to change?
Yeah, so this is, their examples. So, right, definition Upper Darby's up top, and then a reference from the New Boston Code, and then Leah made some comments at the bottom.
Okay.
And then it goes again with the other code, Matamoros Borough.
Okay.
So the percentages, that's the definition, it's for the definition of ancillary. So basically, if that was 51%, if that number went from 2 to 51%, what would happen essentially is any sale under 51%, any gross floor area would be deemed ancillary and thus not be subject to the ordinance. So that's the inverse, I think, of what
Right.
we're trying to do.
You'd want a lower threshold is what you're saying.
Right, or at least that's my understanding, because this is, the first paragraph is the ordinance language, and the second paragraph is is how they're defining ancillary for the carve-outs, so they're not subject to that ordinance, right?
Mhm.
And so for that, I guess we want that as small as possible, so as many shops get classified as smoke shops and thus are subject to whatever restrictions we want.
Right. Right.
So what, all right, let me just clarify so I can get understanding what we're trying to do. Some places are smoke shop. They advertise as smoke shops and that's what they sell, right? So
Correct.
that's what, it's these ancillary sales and mixed-use establishments that is what we want to home in on because they're, yes. And right now, this proposed language says, for ancillary sales, if a grocery store, supermarket, convenience store, or similar market uses no more than 2% of its gross floor area or 200 square feet, whichever is less. Basically, if you're over that number, then you're considered a smoke shop. Okay. All right. I'm okay with that language. I mean, does that make sense to you? So we're putting restrictive.
On the ancillaries only, not the smoke shop stores.
If
Where's-
you're a smoke shop and you get approved as a smoke shop, you're selling tobacco. That's what
Right.
you're not hiding it.
But these other mini mart type
And
stores.
that's the ones that they're not being approved as smoke shops, but that's
And-
where we want to really clamp down on this.
And
Okay.
Jim, here's what's happening is they come in and they say, I want to put a smoke shop here. And I say, you can't do that. You need a special exception. They say, oh, can I have a convenience store? And I say, yes. So then they have a convenience store. That's really a smoke shop.
Yes, right.
And then we have really no easy way to enforce it without counting all of their merchandise.
Right, which is why we talked about doing the square footage of frontage. or-
Exactly. So,
Right.
But I'm
And-
just
but
trying
we
to think of
also
a
have to
number
define.
that they'd still, it'd be easy to prove, like I think sometimes, whatever number you pick is fine.
So basically,
Well, there's two different variations here. We could go, this one is 75 square feet or 2%. And the first one's 2% or 200 square feet, right?
well, that's why I asked that first question, because both of those could make sense in their respective townships, because maybe 75 square feet is about 2% of those storefronts in that town, and maybe in New Boston, 200 square feet is about 2%. Like, the only way you can know that is if we take like a light inventory of about how big are these smoke shops, and that'll determine.
which we can do.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That'll determine like, okay, what number makes sense that equals like about 2%.
Okay, so we just did a quick back of the napkin square footage calculation of a local smoke shop, which you.
And they're
you did
about
it.
650, and they're about
They're
650.
about, so it's a storefront type, that's typically 650 square feet.
Okay, so about 2% of that is.
So I would, to that point, I would say 200 square feet
21 is about 2%.
is a lot. That'd be a third of their store would be smoke. So
So that's what I couldn't figure out.
Okay.
Does that math, that seems like
So,
far off.
I would say the bottom language, the 75 square feet, is a reasonable restriction.
Whichever is less.
Correct.
Still with whichever is less.
Based on that, you said you looked at it in the shop, like in the.
Yes, yeah.
So
So-
that's like analogous to like, and obviously, it won't be 100, it never can be, unless we literally go to everyone to see, but if that's about,
Right,
if that's like the average sort of smoke shop size, then I think that would make
okay.
sense.
So 75 square feet is not big. So if you walk in, I think you'll know right away, you know.
Well, thinking what it
Tiny little-
is and proving it in a zoning hearing board are two different things.
Yeah,
Well, we're talking about a threshold number, it's like, I think that, I don't know if you need to capital P prove it, but I can look at a photograph and say like, that's over half of the store, you know what I mean? Like,
Yes, yeah.
You kind of eyeball it. I don't know if I'm not sure if this has come before the zoning board in an adversarial manner yet. I don't know if you've had to do, and what do you usually, is it usually like photos versus?
Yeah, essentially, we had a case where we effectively found that, right, the 20%, wasn't reasonable. We went shelf by shelf, of, oh, well, maybe this isn't all smoke shop items, or, how did you actually determine 20%? Did you count every piece of, to which I said, no,
And so this at least makes that, I think that's substantially harder to prove at a zoning board versus what we're talking about now.
Absolutely.
So,
I mean, what we
Even if this is
do now
not-
could be solved by a diagram,
Do we have a tobacco license in Upper Darby?
that's state.
State. Okay, so we can't like pull that, anything if they violate. We don't have anything to
It's a
say.
business license. Use and occupancy.
Maybe we could require I don't know the horse is left the stable on this, but maybe we can, well, I guess we already require kind of like a layout for permitting anyway, right?
Absolutely.
Do we require a new one if they need to renew? I guess they don't need to renew it unless they change owners.
Exactly. I mean, there's
So-
only so much enforcement we can do,
Right.
but it's going to be the ones coming in.
So what I hear is that we are in favor of the idea of getting away from counting merchandise and instead counting space.
Right.
That we want to talk about floor space. We don't want to get into volume issues. We just want to go with square footage across the floor situation, because that's more logical, more enforceable, more measurable.
And maybe we could have something for the walls as well, and that the walls can be counted,
Well, we could
in
go
a
to Jim's
vertical
idea,
sense.
if 6 feet of the wall is dedicated to, that's part of it then. It kind of fits right in. So, and then as far as 2%, 75, it sounds like we're thinking the smaller number makes sense for Upper Darby Township.
How much of a lift, I'm assuming it would probably Leah or yourself or some, can we sort of take not an audit per se, but can we look at a few more properties just to make sure that we got, just get a better sense? When we looked at one tonight, can we look at 10, 5, I don't know, like see like comparing sizes just to make sure, because once we choose these numbers and council votes on it.
You want to look
it'll
at,
be kind of a heavy lift to say like, oh, we kind of fudged those numbers a little bit, we need to go back and fix that.
you want to look at property sizes.
Yeah, I just want to
Yeah.
get it, because I just don't have any, because I don't go to smoke shops, so I don't have a real sense of like how big they are inside, really.
Yeah, we can,
I think
we
like
can
that's
do
the
that.
most important thing to get right, because then it makes your job easier.
yeah, we can, we have a list. We can certainly go through and use any of our data or the county data to kind of determine what the floor area is. I think it's reasonable. I don't know how fast it will be, but it's certainly something that I think would be helpful, is kind of to back up our numbers.
Even if it's like the last 5 applications, or the last, like, I just don't know, just anything outside of us, just kind of,
Yeah, there's definitely an average size.
you know what I mean?
Yeah. So if we ask Josh and Leah perhaps to get us some more data on that, then we can zone in on a number. Does anybody have any comments about the 500 feet versus 1,000 feet? It looks like there's some precedence to go with 1,000 from some of the research.
From each other or from?
Both from each other, 1,000 feet from each other, as well as 1,000 feet from certain protected establishments like youth centers, parks, and so on. So you can't be any closer to a park than 1,000 feet, and you can't be any closer to another smoke shop than 1,000 feet. I like 1,000 feet. I think the township's rather large. I think we can handle 1,000 feet.
Yeah, if I'm being honest, I'm not too bothered by the 500. I'm more kind of personally, I'm more, concerned about the stuff that we're talking about, like in the interior, and deciding whether something is or is not a smoke shop. So, I mean, I'm fine with 1,000 feet, but I honestly would be fine if it stayed at 1,200. But
If other towns already have ordinances that are 1,000 feet, and we have a precedent that, I mean, that makes it more restrictive. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm for 1,000.
yeah, it doesn't bother me one way or
Okay.
another, so I'm fine.
Josh, do you feel like that needs more research? I mean, we all seem pretty happy with 1,000.
I think that's fine.
Okay.
I would say let's do it until someone says we can't.
Huh? Okay. All right, does anybody, this is really great.
Yep.
This has really gotten us thinking on some concrete steps for making this an ordinance that's actually enforceable, and for businesses to know ahead of time what they're getting into so that they do this properly, and then we can enforce it in case they're not.
So can I ask one thing? I don't know if we ever talked about this. Is the off-street parking space, the 200 square feet of gross area, is that different than what it would normally be for like any other commercial business on the ground floor? It seems weird that that's pointed out specifically, so I was curious. I don't remember us talking about it, so I wonder, is that distinct from like like if it was just a market and not a smoke shop, would that be one off-street parking space for 200 gross?
I think most retail's 250, one spot for 250. So this is asking for more parking.
Well, what's the like reasoning behind that? It's like random.
I guess they think they're going to be busy.
Hmm?
Guess they think they're going to be busy. I don't know.
I don't think it's kind of random, but kind of distinct.
I would use whatever we have for everybody else. I wouldn't change it.
So maybe look to remove that.
I just didn't get the reasoning for a change. Like if it was a market, would it have less business? I would think it would have more. If it was just, you know what I mean? Why is that more restricted? That seems weird.
I think because they're expecting a lot more comings and goings of more people at the same time. So instead of having 4 spots at a convenience store, you've got to have 5 spots at your smoke shop. Because it's making them provide more, it's making them provide more parking.
So thinking that the smoke shop would be
More
more
transient,
traffic.
more-
and convenience.
I don't know. I think, and I just be, we should just be consistent.
Right, that seems, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I
It's
agree.
just- Yeah, we should just be consistent. Okay. All right, there's another good point. Anything else on smoke shop? Okay, that's all we had on old business. New business, we had talked about some timeframes for some things, things we might try to do this year, longer-term things. I think Josh was going to remind us of some of those timeframes. And also, you want to tell us about the conference?
Yeah. So I guess just, in January, we set our 2023 goals as a planning commission. And, those were to deal with the smoke shop ordinance, to also create a draft ordinance for a draft solar ordinance that included some green stormwater infrastructure from the PEC report that we got. And then the last one was to adopt our own subdivision land development guide that was more focused towards redevelopment versus greenfield development, which is really what the county uses right now. And I think we're making, as you can see, progress with the smoke shop ordinance, but I don't, it's a slow moving boat right now. But, we're certainly open to recommendations, as we go through the process. If you guys see any articles or anything you want to send my way, as you saw, I sent some of those trainings your guys' way. So please, don't hesitate to reach out, as we go through this process.
You get notice of those, like the county or just from like other, like professional trade groups you're a part of?
Sometimes, sometimes the email comes in when they do. This one was actually sent to me by a zoning hearing board member that got it. So in that case, it was, plenty applicable, so I thought it would be great to share. We don't have a budget, so I don't know if you could be reimbursed at this time.
Yes, you will.
We will?
Yes.
Okay. So we'd love to reimburse you if you take these training courses.
Josh, on the, I feel like the smoke shop is coming, it's coming along. It's a little, it's moving slowly, but it's coming along. We had great discussion tonight. The solar one, that's going to come along because largely we're relying on that other group to do the work for us. I mean, right, they gave us all those recommendations. Is there some other body we can go back to then take those regulations and put them into word form, like some, actual ordinance drafting? Or how can we
No.
move that one faster?
So they did their legwork was getting those recommendations to the forefront. It's really just we have to carve out the time to put it into format.
Okay. Okay. And then on the saldo, that one seems like the toughest one.
Yeah. I mean, yes and no, right? You have the county saldo just by default. We can always adopt what's there as ours. And then we have one, right, that we can change and amend, but, it'd be more beneficial if we did it all at once.
Okay.
But just
Okay.
by virtue of not having our own saldo, we automatically
We automatically do
default
the
to
county anyway, right? So, all right, so we need, maybe as a commission, the saldo is on the county's website, right? Maybe we
on our
could just
website, too.
start, and our website. Maybe we could just start looking through it and looking at those areas of it that we think could use a little amending to reflect redevelopment as opposed to green space development.
You pointed out a lot of things you thought should be different for Upper Darby, right?
Yeah, I mean, just talking about redevelopment and where we're really I think the biggest challenge and probably the first thing we should tackle is what do we call land development? The county is very abstract, and it's really focused on, right, taking this big green space and turning it into a housing development or a commercial center. We don't really have that here. We have redevelopments, and I hate for it to all just to go to zoning and then for no one to really being able to look at how it could be fully redeveloped and missing that public participation and the ideals and legislation that's already in the saldo that could improve upon those new developments, which some places wouldn't consider new developments, but we would like to, because we don't have a lot of just empty green fields that we can convert. We have redevelopment, and I think we need to tighten that up.
Does anybody, any more comments on that topic?
On the solar, you talked about briefly for a second, but this is relevant or whatever, but there was a building that they had been putting up solar, and you had shown us pictures or something, and somehow, what happened with that? Just so we kind of know how things are occurring and how we're getting corrected on those.
No, that came down.
Is it Mike's house?
No, that did come down.
It did come down?
Yes. They also did it elsewhere in the county, and it also came down. So,
Was the homeowner, did he want that, or it just kind of got rooked in by the developer, the salesman?
yeah, I mean, the homeowner wants as much power as they can have, and their thought was that if they do that, then they can get more solar panels on the top, which I'm sure the seller was happy about as well. Yeah.
John said it's going to be a big problem going forward. I remember seeing a picture of something that was horrendous. It looked like a third world.
Scaffold.
Yeah, so it shouldn't be a problem going forward. We've caught the two. So there was one other one that we caught before it went up as well. That was like that. And now we're very cognizant of checking, the elevations as well as we do. Because before that, it wasn't even a thought in our heads that someone would do something like that. But that's how you learn. So we're making sure that won't happen again.
Thank you.
And then that will also work its way into the ordinance as well in some capacity.
I had a procedural question.
Yeah.
Maybe, so I was thinking, so in terms of some of the overarching projects that the commission is either that we're either going to be working towards or keeping an eye on. Maybe, I don't know how to characterize it, but maybe we, going forward, we can try to have it, because some of the, like, for example, the solar, I lost track of kind of where we were with that. And so maybe, and this may be a benefit to folks who are attenders watching, that we can add as an agenda item, like just going forward, like a placeholder for like overarching commission projects, like status checks, that kind of thing. Where that way we can like check in every time we have a meeting. And that way we can, like, if there's people like that need to come back, or we need to speak to another group, whether it be an administrative body, someone in administration or something like that, we can slot them in there, whatever the case may be. And that way we can try to keep, that includes the comprehensive plan, things like that. And maybe someone in the commission could be, for each different project, can provide updates if someone wants to volunteer to be the point person to keep track of one of the things, which I'm happy to do. But I was just thinking about that as you were giving the report. Like, I think it might be, we might want to, it's helpful when we get these updates, so we might want to just keep it as a standing agenda item. I think might be a good idea.
Keep it on old business.
Right, like one, yes, like an old business thing, a little more, and then maybe there's an attachment of all the various things that are kind of open. And we might not obviously talk about all of. Sorry, won't be talking about all of them every time, but at least we'd have that list attached just to refresh us each meeting that, oh, there's these 3 other things that we did 4 months ago, and we need to get back to those as well.
Yeah.
I'm thinking like a separate page, and then like you say, we could put a name on it.
It might even be helpful to, when we get to our June meeting,
Yeah,
to look and say, hey, we're 6 months in.
we're 6 months in,
We've
let's,
accomplished
that's a good,
how
that's very
many
good.
of our goals,
Yeah,
or we're working this far towards how many of our goals. And, do we want to sub in, sub out some of our goals? I really like the update on the comprehensive plan. I think that's really awesome, really awesome idea. I'd almost want to see that maybe before some of the other stuff.
right,
Because you don't want to do it too close to when we do the new plan, because then what's the point?
Right.
And, maybe talk about moving some of those goals around.
yeah, no, I think that's great. So if we target that for June, as a check-in on that, so we'll have some sort of comprehensive list together at that point of these are all the things we've sort of touched upon, talked about, where they are, and some new ideas that we want to put in there. And then prioritize a bit, because there's only 6 months left at that point. Okay.
I like it.
How many neighborhood groups do we have active in the township? Do you know? That's okay.
So, yeah, we when I started, we were trying to get a better idea of the neighborhood groups and civic associations. Sometimes they'll pop up for certain projects that they don't like. What was the one tract in Roselawn that all of a sudden a neighborhood association popped up against that has never. Right, they kind of came out of nowhere to oppose the one project and then faded away into the background, which happens. But there's probably, I think the Stonehurst Hills, that's an important one. The Bywood Neighborhood Association, and I think there's another active one over in the Aronimink area. But there's definitely not as many as would be beneficial to the township. Especially as we get into, like, if we want to do something with the TOD overlay, it'd be really good to get a stakeholder consensus on, what do you want, what would you want to see in this area? What would you want your TOD to look like? Get kind of back into that community planning. Not that this isn't good, but, try and get the community involved a little bit more in the vision and design making and stakeholder improvement.
For sure. I mean, the comprehensive plan, the SADO, all that I think can benefit from that. And maybe this is something where we can work with council, because they may have a better idea in their respective areas who are like the stakeholders who are active or engaged. Maybe they go to council meetings. I don't know. They may have a better sense of maybe providing us information. It doesn't have to be like a list of people or groups, but just because I don't have a sense of these neighborhood groups at all, really. The only time, unless I log into a zoning hearing, and like you said, it's something that's kind of controversial, that I even hear mention of one. But other than that, I don't really have a good sense outside of like the kind of formalized ones that are like, you know, sort of tangentially related to the actual administration or like nonprofits. I don't have a sense of like individual independent community groups who have, and what their positions on anything that we've talked about. Unless they come here, I wouldn't know. And so I think maybe if we reach out to council and ask like, hey, are there people in your respective districts or areas who you think should be aware of some of the stuff we're talking about? Maybe a good idea.
Definitely.
Yeah, I'd be comfortable trying, drafting an email and working with Alexis to have it go out to the various council people and just say, as a planning commission, we're trying to be more aware of what's going on. And as we move towards bigger projects like comprehensive plans and so on, we'd like to be aware of what other community groups are out there, that certainly they should be invited to some future things. So I can put something together and run it past you, Josh, and
Yeah, also good if you want to try and get a survey out,
Yeah,
and they can usually
they can
send
be-
it,
yeah.
and you get a lot more responsive if it comes from someone that they know.
Because there were a lot of people at the Parks Planning meeting a few weeks ago
Mhm.
who came out for that, so they have to have an interest and willing to devote time.
Yeah, and I think public engagement and stakeholder engagement is, a huge part that we haven't really done too much yet as a brand-new planning commission. But maybe, as we kind of go through these projects, I'm really thinking TOD and the comprehensive plan update could be some, important outreach opportunities.
yeah, so if you guys are fine with that, I'll draft up
Perfect.
something and, yeah, okay. All right. Josh, tell us about your conference. Does anybody have anything else? Tell us about your conference.
So we, Philadelphia hosted the American Planning Association National Conference, which was a great opportunity. We got to meet planners from all over the country, see presentations from all over the country, and it was really great to kind of network, see new ideas, what's kind of on the forefront of everything. And Upper Darby got a special shout out. We were one of the mobile tours, so essentially a group came down from the convention center, came down the 69th Street, and then walked to the Second Ward Playground, where we talked about the playground, the development, and then using CDBG funds to get that process and what that looked like, and then, show them the stormwater garden and everything. So that was a really great kind of a highlight to show all these national planners and, get Upper Darby up on the national stage. Yeah.
No, I saw it on LinkedIn.
Oh, you saw Steve's post,
Yes, yeah. You were giving
It was
us
great.
board.
And nice picture of all of us with the 69th Street sign in the background.
When was it last in Philadelphia?
I believe 2007. So it's usually somewhere far away, like San Francisco, or next year it's in Minnesota. So this was the best because I could I'm going to wake up and get on the train and go.
Okay, I think that brings us to the end of the agenda. Does anybody have anything else or a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion.
Okay,
I second it.
okay, we are adjourned at 8:08. Thank you.
You can have it.